Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafidades Antiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. One of the areas of the humanities, of course, is religion. And today we turn our attention to the religion of Islam. And here to share about this religion from both a personal and professional perspective is Farah Younis. Farah, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour.
Hello, Hafidades Antiro. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for chatting with us today about Islam, which has been a part of both your personal story and your area of professional expertise. Start us off with telling us a little bit about you and your family.
Yes, so my father is Mr. Abed Younis. He is a Palestinian and was a Muslim. And since I had family there in Israel, I had moved there at the age of 10, and I'd stayed there for just about 3 years. And since I was with my family there, became a Muslim when I was there.
Wow, I hadn't realized that the time you spent there was when you were so young. I thought you were like out of high school, but you were still a child then at that time.
Yes, yeah, I was very young.
So what is Islam?
Islam is pretty much a religion that began in the 7th century. It sees itself as a continuation to Judaism and Christianity. It was taught by the Prophet Muhammad to the people of Saudi, who at the time worshipped idols and other deities. By the time of his death, all the idols were removed from the Kaaba, a sacred temple to the former religion, and Islam began to spread. Islam focuses on the teachings of the Quran, which is similar to the other holy books. Since it's a continuation, it has similar stories and acknowledges Moses and Jesus as prophets, just like Muhammad.
I think that's an important point for people to understand, is that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all monotheistic gods and religions, and that they believe in one God, and in fact they're kind of based on the same God.
Yes, they are the same God.
Beginning story.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about Muhammad and who he is in the Islam faith?
Yes, he is their prophet. There are no depictions of him due to them avoiding people worshiping any kind of idol. He was born in the 520 CE in Saudi, and he, was sort of, I don't remember exactly his profession exactly. I know I think he was a tradesman. And at times he would go away to a cave and just kind of like be by himself and avoid kind of, I don't know, I forget, there was like some kind of something that he avoided. But anyway, while he was there, the angel Gabriel came to him and gave him the message of God. And from then on, he was given the Quran, wrote it all down, and recited it to his followers. Sorry, it's a little chopped up. It's not exactly the exact story, but it's somewhere along those lines.
That brings us to a really important part of the Muslim faith, which is the Quran.
Yes.
Which I guess you could call like the scripture for Islam.
Yes, it's like their Bible. Yes, correct.
The Quran also contains some of the same stories as in the Bible, I understand. Is that correct?
Correct.
But it's not. Are there any other writings in Islam that are important in addition to the Quran?
Yes, so after the Quran was written, the Prophet had his own writing, which is called the Hadith, and it was pretty much sort of a recommendation of how one should live as a Muslim, how they should conduct themselves. And then shortly after that was the Sharia, and Sharia was written by clergymen who also kind of had their own version of how they think Muslims should conduct themselves as well.
So it's almost like an instruction on daily living. If you want to be a good Muslim, these are the things you should do.
Yes.
I think. Okay. You mentioned Sharia, which I think it's a word some people may be familiar with from the media, but it's not. Can you explain to us a little bit more about what the Sharia is and how it is applied?
Yes, so the Sharia it's also based on countries. Pretty much the Islamic clergymen write these laws down. It could be really anything from what you wear to all that kind of stuff. So it's not really it's not really rooted in the Quran. It's really about the clergymen and what they think their society, how they think their society should conduct themselves as Muslims.
Is that why it, depending on what country you're in, there seems to be different rules for lifestyle? Like, if you're in some Muslim countries, it's a little bit more strict, and in other countries, it might be a little bit more like westernized.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's some countries that are very strict, like Saudi, and there's others that are a little bit more liberal. So it really just depends.
Now, you lived in Israel. Where does that fall in the spectrum as far as how strict living is? Is it more towards the more strict side or more towards the liberal side?
More towards the liberal side, for sure. When I lived there in the village, there wasn't a lot of restrictions, except, of course, being pious and being conservative and that sort of a thing, but not necessarily you can't wear certain things, not at all. As long as you are dressed modestly, it's permissible. As long as you're not showing too much skin, and then it's okay.
Okay, cool. And maybe a little bit later on, I'd love to hear, what are some of the things you practiced while you were there. But as far as the foundation of the faith, and you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned piety or what it was you said.
Yes.
I understand there's like 5 pillars.
Yes, there are.
Islam?
Yes, there are 5 pillars.
What are they?
One of them is the profession of faith.
Which means?
Pretty much professing that you are a Muslim.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the second one is prayer. And then you have, which, you can pray 5 times a day depending on how religious you are. Just like how everyone not necessarily goes to church all the time on Sunday. It's also kind of the same thing. If you do want to pray 5 times a day, you can. And then, of course, charity. It's a big thing to be very generous and kind to everyone around you. And then fasting, of course, which is the Ramadan time. And then the pilgrimage. So any Muslim from wherever they are in the world and making that pilgrimage to Mecca, that's very important.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Ramadan and fasting?
Okay, so from my experience as a child and going through it, what I remember was when it starts, it's usually at the break of dawn. You have the adhan, the call to prayer, and prior to that first call to prayer, we stuff ourselves. Big breakfast. No, yeah, like at 4 a.m, we'll wake up, stuff ourselves, and then go back to sleep, go about our day and not eat or drink a single thing until sunset. And once that last call to prayer is sounded, we have a huge feast. It's beautiful, with all your family, and it was, as a kid, it was pretty fun. I saw it as something fun.
So, and this is for a month, correct?
Yes, correct.
So for a month, you don't eat and drink between sunrise and sunset.
Correct.
And I think I first learned about Ramadan when I was a kid, and I was reading about horse breeders in a Muslim country, and I think even the animals. I could be wrong. Maybe the animals got to eat and drink.
I think so.
Okay, that was a childhood. I got it wrong. But anyways, very interesting. What is the purpose of Ramadan?
It's sort of like a restart, a cleansing, a show of dedication, that sort of a thing.
And getting back to what you were saying about charity, are there any specific expectations? For example, in Christianity, there are some churches teach like you should give a certain percentage of your income back to the church. Are there any specific like guidelines or expectations for charity, or is it more like what comes from your heart?
Yeah, I may be wrong on this, but from what I observed is pretty much what comes from your heart. There was way back in the day when that first started, there was a percentage of taxes that you had to give, but I do not think that is the case anymore.
Could you give us also a little bit of insight into one of the other pillars, prayer? I think people are familiar with the image of Muslims bowing down to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Why and how is prayer conducted the way it is in the religion?
So depending, of the mosque is pretty much a place for gentlemen to go. And you have an imam there who conducts the prayer. He reads from the Quran. And you can also pray at home. The most important thing is that you have your prayer rug. You don't have to have it, but that the most important thing is you face towards Mecca. So you and your prayer rug are faced towards it and that you're praying in that direction.
And what is Mecca for those that may not be familiar with it?
Mecca is a place in Saudi where the Kaaba is, and the Kaaba is a very ancient temple that the Prophet went to and destroyed the idols that were there from the previous religion and kind of made that claim that Islam is there to stay.
Okay, well, I would say that's a great introduction, big picture view to Islam. And when we come back, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your area of expertise, which is Muslim art.
Yes, the Islamic art and architecture, yes.
As well as some of these dynasties that you've mentioned and what they've contributed to civilization today. Mm-hmm. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
All right, we'll be back with more after this break.
Tirowomi. Lalrahiel, Ngebulasi on Northern Marianas Humanities Council, Rihimaseg Rabayora, Emmasegi La Shushu, Biha Aelig Rech, Yarayora Bulastoye Humanities Council. Bulasioyel, Nyalisir Tola Brerewe Amuri Alangal Masmasal, Malwer Lal Marianas. Ewewe Shakutul, Ngerafatal Meta Malerarmas, Alangal Mahutukutul Lal Sab, Merongrong Tola. Ayatarwahami, Babu Fiti Shulapia Akamesharahami, Babu Tabwe Metaya Afshia Tutelal, Lalrahia 2021. Akatetenga, Babu Warihami Meye. Hiliso.
Welcome back to your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking today about Islam with Farah Younis from both her personal and professional perspective. Farah, I would have to say I had the opportunity to make some Muslim friends playing football, soccer here. Most of them were from Bangladesh. And it was really such a blessing because I hadn't had an opportunity before to see how really kind and generous. Maybe it was a cultural thing, but I also think maybe it was a religious thing based on what you've said.
Yes. So, as I mentioned before, charity. So any time any Muslim is given an opportunity to be kind and generous, they will definitely jump on it. Culturally too, in the Arab culture, we're very hospitable people. I mean, it's to the point where culturally almost every home has a space that's called a duan where it's just meant to host guests.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like the pala pala in Saipan.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it's important to remember, a lot of the coverage in the media may not be about these stories about the culture and stuff like that. They're more about the extremists. But in every religion,
absolutely, yeah,
you can have extremists.
Yes, and they give everyone a bad name.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, getting back to what you were saying earlier about dynasties and empires, those of the Islam religion have really contributed a lot to civilization through the centuries.
Oh, yes.
Can you give us like highlights or a big picture?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So after when Islam started to spread, one of the first empires was the Umayyad, dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty. Once it had broken apart, one of the princes actually left and fled and went to Spain and began the Umayyad dynasty in Spain. And so while that was happening, the Abbasids took over, and then afterwards you have the others like the Ilkhanids, the Mamluks, and the Ottoman Empire. And while all this is going on, also a third branch broke off, and that was the Samanids in Iran, and then which went to the Seljuks of Iran, and then became the Timurid Empire in Iran, and then the Safavid Empire in Iran. And while during these later dynasties, another branch broke off, and it was the Mughal Empire of India. So you know how in English when you say a Mughal, right?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it comes from that word Mughal Empire. It was an Islamic dynasty that ruled over the northern part of India, and they're the ones who built the Taj Mahal.
Oh really?
Yes.
Oh okay.
Oh, and so when you were saying about inventions and stuff, so
Yeah.
when the prince ran away and fled to Spain, and when he established the Umayyad dynasty there, they had built an incredible city in the southern part of Spain. It was so beautiful that, and they were the ones who did everything from like the sewage system and stuff like that, because at the time medieval Europe had none of that going on, and
they just kind of threw the waste out the window,
exactly.
as I recall. Already.
So and the south of Spain had lights and everything, street lights. So when the Europeans would come down, they would fall in love with it and call it the City of Lights, and it was so advanced. Everything from textiles. I mean, this is all over all the dynasties that I've mentioned. Their textiles, their craftsmanship, the metallurgy, blacksmithing, everything. It was just very well accomplished. I mean, and you know, like I said, they continued what the Greeks did in math, astronomy. They were the first to have the hospitals. That's why you don't hear of the bubonic plague crossing over there, because they actually had hospitals that knew how to quarantine the sick.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah. They invented algebra, the number zero, and so much more in astronomy and more things in mathematics. Yeah.
That kind of blows my mind to think that before they thought of it, there was no number for zero. Like, how would you quantify you had none before the Muslims invented zero?
Right.
I don't know. That's a deep question. Also, things like glass
Yes,
blowing.
yeah, glass blowing, mosaics. Yeah, absolutely. They invented quite a lot of things that we use now in the modern world.
Now, your master's is actually in Muslim art? Or?
Yes, so my master's is in art history,
Okay.
and my focus is on Asian and Islamic arts and
Now,
architecture.
Why did you choose that?
Just because it was something that I always wanted to learn. I've seen how beautiful the mosaics were growing up, and the geometric designs that they had done, and the arabesques, and the writings, everything. And it was something that I was very interested in, as especially my father being an artist. I wanted to just kind of get more deeper into that and see what culturally, artistically, what it was like.
Is there a philosophy or a something that really defines what Muslim art is?
Yeah, so a lot of their focus is not on recreating reality, like realism or anything like that. They believe that God made everything as is, so why try and imitate on paper or canvas? Instead, they focused on, geometric art, miniature paintings, a lot of other artistic practices that moved away from trying to recreate reality.
Does that have something also to do with the commandment, like don't make any image? Like, for example, you said there's no image of Muhammad, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, just to prevent, idol worship, worship of idols. But no, it's more like just not competing with God's artistry, that kind of a thing. So yes, they did do portraits, but it was more two-dimensional. It was more miniature art. It was more in that fashion. Yeah.
Okay. Could you name for us any works of art that we might be familiar with? You mentioned, the Taj Mahal.
Yes.
I think that's probably the biggest.
Yes, and another misconception about the Taj Mahal is a lot of people think that it was built for Shah Jahan's favorite wife, Mumtaz, but it was not. She was his favorite, but he did not build it for her. He was very confident that when Judgment Day came, that God himself would come to the Taj Mahal, because the Taj Mahal is so beautiful, so exquisitely designed, with its gorgeous gardens and white marble, a bejeweled interior. He was so confident that he thought when Judgment Day came, God would come to the Taj Mahal, because it's the closest thing that looks like heaven, with the rivers and the little ponds and all this kind of yeah. And so even in the gates to enter the Taj Mahal, if you knew how to read Arabic, you would see that the scripture on there is all about Judgment Day and not his love for his favorite wife.
You have just blown our minds right there. What other places have you been to the Taj Mahal?
Unfortunately, no, but I did recently go to Istanbul.
Okay.
Where the Ottoman Empire was. It's actually the last of the largest of the empires, Islamic empires ever. It expanded from all the way south, all the way to Europe, pretty much. It was a huge empire, all the way east. So I went to Istanbul, and for the sole purpose to see the Hagia Sophia, the Topkapi Palace, and the Blue Mosque. Especially the Blue Mosque, it's an incredible architectural accomplishment by the Ottoman Empire.
Does it have a personal significance to you with your family background, being Muslim, to be in places like that?
Yes, those kind of places, not necessarily because it's Islamic places, but also because of the artistry. It's something I studied for so long. So going there was very significant, because I actually get to, instead of looking at pictures of these places, I actually get to go and experience them, be in that space, absorb that space. So that was it was amazing.
You mentioned the Taj Mahal, and I think everybody has this image of their mind of what it looks like. Are there architectural features that are particular to Muslim architecture?
Arches.
What are they?
Oh my goodness, arches and domes. They perfected arches and domes. So if you look at a lot of their palaces and mosques, you will see repetitive arches, stacks and stacks of domes upon one another, and that's what's the brilliance of the Blue Mosque. Is it's the first of its kind, where it has a grand inner space that stands alone because of the particular design of it, of how full domes fall into half domes, to quarter domes, to smaller domes. The Hagia Sophia, although it did do that, it did have really huge buttresses on the outside that held these domes from collapsing within themselves. The Blue Mosque did without the buttresses, and because of its the way it was designed, it ensured that it didn't need those that type of support on the exterior.
Coming back now to personal perspective on the religion as a Muslim, and you said that you did adopt the lifestyle of the religion when you were in Israel. What are some things that you would think about during the day as you're going about your day? You know, from the time you wake up, is there something in particular you would do as a Muslim, whether it be eating, whether it be interacting, whether it be going about the city, or what's on a person's mind? Are there particular things?
No, because I was so young that all I was thinking about was playing, having fun, eating all the good food.
Like children around the world.
Yeah, the best thing about living there was how fresh everything was and how everyone grew everything. What you needed was in you and your neighbors and village's backyard, pretty much. That was what the best part of it, I thought. Cool. Yeah, you pretty much made everything you needed and wanted to eat.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share with us today and for the insights that you've given us. Any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of, a takeaway for everyone is that, be mindful of what the media, how it portrays Islam and Muslims. Like I mentioned every religion has its extremes, extremists, and who do extreme acts, whether it's violent or whatever. And also that depending really on the country that you're in, the strictness and the oppression is not there, really depending on where you go. It's really a religion about being being a giving person, a charitable person, and being generous to your neighbors, good to those around you. It is really a more peaceful religion than what people may think. That's why you have people like Muhammad Ali and Dave Chappelle converting, because at the core of it, it really is a very peaceful and generous religion.
I like that, and I would say if you don't have any friends who are Muslim and you have the opportunity to build that relationship, it can be a really insightful and mutually beneficial experience. So don't be afraid or hesitant, as Farah said. Generally, very generous and kind people. Thank you so much. Farah.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've been chatting today with Farah Younis, sharing her perspectives on Islam from both a personal and professional outlook. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.